Dear Thai, dear Noble Sangha, today is Christmas Day, 2023. We're having our morning session, both at the Mindfulness Center and on Zoom, a hybrid session. Our 26th Christmas that we have had at the Mindfulness Practice Center in its various locations. I want to say that I've been so fortunate in so much of my life. But the fortunate parts that I really want to talk about today are, I had the job of being a pediatrician for 35 years. And my older sister, Sue, who knows me well, said something along the lines of all the people she knew, I was the one person who had the most perfect job for them. And it really was. And now, as I've gone into retirement, I have, and actually they've overlapped quite a bit. Before I was retired from being a pediatrician, I started teaching the Buddha Dharma. And I can't believe what joy it gives me. And to see people like you and to be able to help you on this beautiful path. I would say, without really exaggeration, the Buddha and the most personal manifestation I know of the Buddha, Thich Nhat Hanh, saved my life. I would have been a completely different person and certainly not nearly as happy or as settled as I am right now, thanks to Thai and thanks to Gautama Siddhartha. This is a Sangha. The Sangha, the Buddha Sangha, is the oldest continuous living human organization. It is 2,600 years unbroken. Wow. Talk about that the next time your book club starts celebrating 10 years, right? So my thing that I did that I didn't realize was that even before I started falling back into the Dharma, meaning I became a pediatrician, and for about, 7 or 8 years, I wasn't doing any practice. I was just being a pediatrician. I was actually practicing and didn't really know it, and found that I was seeing great Buddhas everywhere. So let me put that aside for a second and explain how this all comes together. And let's talk about why we celebrate this day, why we celebrate Christmas. The first part of it is to have this idea about having some sort of a ceremony or some sort of a holiday that involves the returning of the light. As you all know, the winter solstice was 4 days ago, and every day is getting a little bit more light and a little bit more light and a little bit more light. And various cultures have done that, including, quite frankly, the Buddhist culture. If you are in a Buddhist culture that uses the Western calendar, the Buddha's Enlightenment Day is December 8th, near the solstice. Our friends down the street at the Milwaukee Zen Center just finished something called the Rahatsu Sesshin, which is related to that. And the legend is that no one really knew when Jesus was born. In fact, if there is the fact that there were shepherds in the fields during his birth, the only time the shepherds are in the fields in the Middle East is during lambing season, which is in the spring. So that's, if there's any evidence of what season he was born, it's probably in the spring. But the Roman emperors decided that they needed something to counteract Saturnalia, which was an old pagan festival and full of a lot of drunkenness and a lot of other kind of fun things. And so you needed to kind of get that back in order. So they moved Christmas to that particular time. But the returning of the light is this, even if it was accidentally put there, even if Jesus was born sometime other, is really this metaphor for our coming out of darkness and going into the beautiful light. And happy to celebrate it in that manner. Another reason for Christmas is this consideration of God being born in man. I would take a little bit different tack on that. I have a different definition of God. Uh, but in that regard, I would agree that this one person, sure, had God born into him, but I think all the rest of us have had too. But it's nice to kind of have that sort of idea that comes about. The other kind of thing that we talk about is somebody who became a great person from humble origins because of the, the sweeping winds of the world or whatever. And we will talk about all of these things. And of course, the things that Jesus did in the many, and I'll quote him again in just a few moments, the wonderful wisdom that has come about. And despite the fact that the history is strewn with such things as conquerings and inquisitions, through much of humanity, Christianity has been extraordinarily kind and, and beneficent to so many people. The one thing I want to talk about is the actual idea of the human birth, the precious human birth. And those of you who have, been at one other than your own, is the idea that there is this marvelous transition and this marvelous opening into a way that is known to us and yet not known to us. We have been there before. The one thing I'd like to know more about the Christmas story is, how did Mary and Joseph feel about all this? I know how I felt when, my son and daughter were born. It was an incredible event, and I was prepared for this. I was prepared for this to be something different. The kinds of things like, IVs and beeping monitors weren't really foreign to me. And there it was. And I saw that. My training before I found Thai, and actually even before that, I practiced 4 years at the Shambhala Center before I found Thai, was preset by the fact that most of my days, I would go off and see a baby or two, or sometimes as many as four, before I would go off to my office. And there, right there in this baby, innocent, small, seemingly helpless, was this great manifestation of Buddha nature, the most pure manifestation of Buddha nature I ever knew. And I didn't go with the idea of getting spiritual fulfillment. I went because we needed to make sure the baby was okay, right? Didn't have a heart murmur or a cleft palate or something like that, and that everything was going to be okay. And I was expecting that I was going to be able to educate and help enlighten parents about this. Well, quite frankly, I didn't realize that it was happening to me little by little. We talked a little bit yesterday about filling your pot drop by drop. Every time I saw a baby and saw the immensely happy family, not just the parents, but grandparents, sometimes aunts and uncles and cousins. I remember one Greek family in St. Mary's, there must have been 30 of them. I don't know how they all got in. This beautiful, beautiful existence and all this happiness and all of this wonder. And when the people, it got to be that one of my favorite things to do, and I got to be pretty good at it, was to hold the baby on my left arm, cradle his head in my hand or her hand, her head or his head, and just kind of watch and see how it goes, touch in various places when I know I was trying to do things. And it was amazing. The amazing happiness, the amazing amount of joy that came by. And I'm certain that in Bethlehem, that was exactly what was happening. And those of you who have had that overwhelming experience of being with the newborn, this was happening to Mary and Joseph, and probably even to the shepherds and anybody else that came by. I think this was an amazing thing. And when you look into the eyes of these young Buddhas, they would look right through you into your soul. And when I would look at these young babies, this is what I would see. There he was, their Buddha nature, right then and there, shining out for me. There's a wonderful song that I also remember hearing like the first time. It was interesting because I was actually on my way to see baby at St. Mary, a different baby at St. Mary's Hospital, of course, that was that I heard the Paul Simon song for the first time called Born at the Right Time, where we see these babies that they've never been lonely, never been lied to, never had to scuffle in fear, nothing denied to. Born at the instant church bells chime, the whole world whispering, born at the right time. And I just got so much of that going on that it was hard not to be transformed by it. I was one of those people actually that, a lot of pediatricians didn't like necessarily going up and doing, duty and having to traipse all over the city to kind of go see babies before their office hours. I would volunteer to do that for them some, because what an experience that was. And the babies that are born, not all, some babies have already had some mud splattered on them. But most of the babies I saw had pure Buddha nature right then and there, right in your hands. You could see it, you could feel it. It was amazing. We all know what happens, of course, is as time goes on, our little Buddha nature gets splattered with mud and covered over. And some of that mud cakes over until it looks like a big block. I often talk to people about this in my class, that what you see when we see a statue of the Buddha is that it was encased in something, a wooden block or a stone block, and we had to take parts away to reveal that Buddha nature. But we weren't born with that block. That just happened because it was going on. And it is somewhat impossible to really miss. It's like if you had a beautiful Buddha, but it's going to rain, and let's face it, the Buddha sits out in the rain, it's going to get wet. That kind of thing is going to happen to us. But the idea that I resist, and the one thing that the Christians say about Jesus that was special was that he had no original sin. I think in the Buddhist the way of looking at things, we also say they have no original sin. They're perfect the way they are. They, if they could speak to us, they can really feel themselves being that wave on the water, on the ocean. They know that they're part of some kind of great ocean. They know that they are that particular wave. They have that feeling, even in their very minimal things that are going on with them. And we know that that gets kind of lost. But we return. Both in Buddhism and in Christianity, you talk about rebirth. In Buddhism, it's often talked about rebirth as the idea of this idea that you die and you become something else, which I actually think sometimes gets in the way because, if you've got this bad karma, I don't know, you cheated on your taxes. Well, don't worry about that. I can take care of that in the next life. As opposed to having an urgency of practicing now. The Christians have a better way of talking about it as being born again. I almost like that for the Buddhist way of being it. As we take the mud and the filth and the difficulty and we do our practice so that that goes away bit by bit by bit to reveal this, we're back to right where we were when we were born. All of you have this. All of you have this wonderful little creature inside, this Buddha nature, this little statue. There it is. I have often said that you don't have to go anywhere or do anything special to see a Buddha. There's one on your right, there's one on your left, and there's one sitting with you right now. We all have this great, if we all have this great Buddhahood, shouldn't we start acting like Buddhas? Well, yeah, I hope so. That's kind of how this can all go. And this is the celebration that I do when Christmas comes up. It's not the celebration of a particular human birth, but of all human birth that we all consider to be very precious. This precious human birth that allowed us to come forth with Buddha nature, we can return to that Buddha nature. We can do it bit by bit. We can do it drop by drop. So I'm just encouraging people to practice. However you feel about yourself, however you feel about the difficult people in your life, however you feel about your life circumstances and the way the world is going, et cetera, realize this: you have Buddha nature. You are a Buddha. You can manifest. Just takes a little practice. Some people have more mud splattered on them than others, and it takes a little, but as you get more and more, you get to see it, get to see through it, little by little, drop by drop. And so after I was a pediatrician and started, Thich Nhat Hanh saved my professional life as well, because when I started practicing with Thich Nhat Hanh, I started to see all babies not as own human nature, but as their own individual Buddha nature. They're all waves on the ocean, but some waves are more interested than the others. Some waves are higher. Some waves have lots of little caps in them. Some waves have a ton of fish in them. Some don't. Some have little red algae. There's all little different things. They're all water, but they all have their own individual way of being. We all have basic goodness. We all have this wonderful way of being. So I like to think Christmas is a celebration of birth. And I think that the heroes that we tend to neglect or don't talk much about are Mary and Joseph. I would love to go back and say, how does this feel, guys? How does this feel? No one knew, or maybe they did, but they weren't telling. No one knew that he was going to become, of course, this great leader of the Christian religion. But it was also this idea that everybody has that sort of capacity. The Buddha himself made the statement that, well, anybody can do this. That was his sitting under the Bodhi tree was like, duh, anybody can do this. Isn't that great? And Jesus later in his Gospels mentioned that the wonderful phrase that I like to use, which is, be as little children, or you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Be as little children. Have a play date. Go skip rocks on a lake. Go find. Just think of the joy of how that all is. And I had the wonderful opportunity of not hanging around just with babies, but older kids. And I got to see a lot of the slide. I got to see a lot of people covered with mud, parents and children, because of the suffering of the world. And I did my best, and I hope we can do our best to continue to go with that. The idea of Christmas for me has now become the idea of being born. And I hope we all can get back to that basic human nature. Another really, and I'm going to put it on the share screen here and we'll just go over this a little bit. Another really wonderful thing happened during this 25th anniversary. I do not know who resurrected. I don't know where it was. But in the Mindfulness Center, up on the shelf that's behind Joanna there, is this little framed thing that, and maybe some of you have seen it from earlier days, that I don't remember if it was there the first day we opened the center in 1998, but it was definitely there the first year. Somebody brought it in and we used it. And I don't know what happened to it. but it just came back. And this is the lesson I want to get for Christmas is this just came back before Christmas. It's like somebody was telling me this is what I've got to teach today. So let me see if I can get that up for you here. The 12 symptoms of inner peace. Let me see if I can get that a little larger. I don't want it that large. Whoops. I have to go back now and all right, well, however I can figure it, you'll have to just go with it. The 12 symptoms of inner peace. Number one, I don't know who the author of this is. And number two, I really don't know when it got to the center exactly, but I hope we can always stay with that. One, the tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than from fear based on past experience. Two, an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. I have to say that that's been part of my 2023. I've had a lot of ups and downs in 2023, more downs than a usual year. But I will tell that there's been an ability from all of my teachings to say, well, even if this isn't so pleasant, at least it's interesting. And have been able to kind of get through that. Number three, loss of interest in judging self. Number four, loss of interest in judging other people. Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to give up. Five, loss of interest in conflict. Six, loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others. And number seven, and they give a warning with this one, loss of the ability to worry. This is a serious symptom. 8, frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. 9, contented feelings of connectedness with others and nature. 10, frequent attacks of smiling through the eyes of the heart. One of the things I've been finding a little bit happening nowadays, and it makes me very joyous when I do this, is, I don't know, sometimes I'm sitting there either leading meditation or just being one of the people in the center for meditation. And I'm just kind of sitting there and breathing and smiling. I notice somebody is just sitting there and has suddenly a spontaneous smile. Something is going on. So as they settle in their meditation, they notice the joys. 11, increasing susceptibility to love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it. This is what happens when you're in the ocean. If you're in the ocean and you're a wave and you get a lot of warmth, you can't do anything about that. That warmth will go out to everybody else. And if the rest of the ocean gets warm, you'll get that warmth, even if you were cold before. You can't do anything about it. As long as you're open and not trying to box yourself off and pretend that you, as this wave, are independent of all these other waves. And the increasing tendency to let things happen rather than make them happen. This is the wonderful thing. This is what this guy is doing. This is what the new baby is doing. This is our birthright, so to speak. Everything comes to coming home. Everything is, in the new term that I would use it, as I would use it in the Buddhist text, to be born again, to come once again to this creature, become this wonderful creature, open, loving, and connected, and having this wonderful idea of, this is our birthright. This is where we are. This is natural. This is how it is. And we all lose our way. Let's face it, the world is full of mudslingers. We're all going to get covered with mud. We all can help each other go through this. I do know that one of the things that has gone on for me is the Sangha. The three jewels are the Buddha. Well, yeah, there it is, the Buddha nature, that the little baby with their open eyes looking into your forehead have. You can see it, you can feel it, it's intense. Yeah, that's the Buddha. The Dharma, all the stuff we learn about, including going through this talk and everything else. Wonderful, wonderful. But I think a little bit maybe in the West, there's too much idea that all we have to do is get enough pieces of knowledge. All we have to do is read enough sutras. If we read enough sutras, we'll be enlightened. That's all we have to do. Not so. We need to practice. And that's where the Sangha comes in. My goodness, the fortunate the thing that occurred to me was that my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, could have been a lot of other teachers, was talking about how we all got together as a Sangha. Even Jesus got a Sangha together right away. You know, he got shepherds, he got wise men, he got a whole bunch of animals, he got a whole Sangha together, all the right. He just realized he needed a Sangha to kind of get going. This, yeah, I'm sure Jesus looking at this saying, it is going to be hard. I need a Sangha. And he kind of did that. This is what has really come for us, is that depending on each other, we can travel through this world with wisdom and happiness. And I wish that all for you on this particular day. I don't know what your day is involved. Maybe you'll have some family things. Somebody talked about this yesterday, about in one of our talks, where someone said, think you're enlightened? Go home for the holidays. The idea, however, that we really are connected, not just to our close kin and our close friends, but to all of the universe and all of nature. And when that happens to us, how can we not feel that there's this just wonderful, precious human birth? And so I hope maybe I can give you an idea, instead of just returning to the light, which this is, or God born in man. And I think that God is born in man, in every one of us. I think that's the Buddha nature part of it. And that's me. And that may not be following the dictum of a lot of other people's particular spiritual paths, and I respect that. Or the celebration that we are born without original sin. We are born pure, and I know that I can say, look around you to everybody, but if you have a chance to see a newborn baby, or even a really young baby, or even a toddlers, wow, are they present moment masters? You know, you might just see them, if you see them during these holidays, say, hey, thanks, you know, thanks for showing up. Thanks for showing your Buddha nature up here today. And again, if anybody ever has, if their young people are coming along and they want to be a pediatrician, tell them it's a great spiritual path, besides all the other good stuff. So I'm going to bow out and open the Sangha for Dharma sharing. And I'm going to stop the recording. So your Dharma share, you're not going to end up in the on our website if you say something really outrageous today. Or at least not from this way anyway. So